welcome to the England Spahtens show. This is part one of a two-part special for the 2017 Obstacle Course Race World Championships. Sandy and Josh were able to go. They had a blast. This episode we talk about the 3K and the 15K. Enjoy the show. If this is your first time listening to the show, thanks for checking us out. We record roughly weekly, and you get to listen to myself, Paul Jones, Sandy Ree, and Josh Chase chat about the obstacle course racing scene. We also do interviews with race directors and business owners in the OCR space. I encourage you to go and check out all of our other episodes over on podcast.nyspartans.com, and while you're there, subscribe to us. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, anywhere else you're going to find a podcast. You can also find us over on Facebook as the England Spahtens Show, and we really encourage you to leave questions in the comments that we answer every episode. Now let's get on with the show. Welcome to the England Spahtens Show. What episode are we on, Josh?
61.
Yay! We've got it this week.
I checked.
I'd say that's cheating, but I have the same tab in my browser open with the web episode list. So this
I
is...
just leave it to the two of you to do it.
And every now and then we try and stump Sandy. So this is the Obstacle Course Race World Championship 2017 show, which I didn't get to go to for a myriad of reasons, but you guys did.
Yes, we did.
Yep,
and actually, this is part one.
This will be part one. I think the plan today is we're going to talk about the arrival, the check-in, and then the first two races, which would be the first 2 days. And we'll save the rest of it and some conclusions for the second show or another show. But I will let you guys lead, and I will simply interject with annoying questions along the way. Because I watched from afar. I did not get to go. How was OCR World Championship?
The Cliff Notes version, 10 out of 10, as usual.
There we go. Show's
really
done.
simple.
Let's drive on.
Yeah, that's it. Wash our hands
Done
of
and
it.
dusted.
Round of applause.
So,
there you go. Nice job.
Done and dusted. Oh, I didn't see Mr. What's his name? Mark Leinster?
No, Leinster. He was not there this year.
He was
I know.
not
I
there.
was very sad. I asked Adrian, and he just said that he wasn't able to attend this year.
Yeah, that's okay. So, yeah, I mean, I think this event is worthy of, obviously, a super in-depth conversation, and there's a lot of different facets to this event that really combine together to kind of make it one big, glorious experience, obviously, for most of the runners and racers out there. And what I'm loving, too, is as I... Sandy, Vince, and myself, we, like last year, decided to go up super early. So we went up on Wednesday. Sorry, my beeping in the background. We went up on Wednesday to make sure that we were there to kind of get a scope of the venue and see the build process as it was happening. We also got a chance to just kind of take an early look at some of the obstacles and mingle with some of the athletes that are there. And, if you haven't been to Blue Mountain in Ontario, it really is kind of the perfect venue for an event like this. You've got this, up-and-coming, really nice, really well-designed kind of Olympic-type village where you've got, all the shops, the restaurants, the hotels surrounding the event itself. You've got the obstacles built right into the festival area, right into the village there. So it really, as you walk in, to this resort, right off the bat, you're entrenched in the whole experience. So you can't go anywhere in this resort without seeing, a poster, a billboard. I mean, hell, when we got there and we went to Rusty's for dinner the first night, they had Ryan Atkins on posters in the men's bathroom saying,
Yes, they did. Well,
that's
I can't say about
disconcerting.
the men's bathroom, but...
So, question. So I spent
Yes.
all year talking to the rental property people, getting the biggest chalet they had, and then I didn't get to go. So how was the biggest chalet they had? Was the venue good, or the accommodation?
the accommodations were amazing. So we got to the chalet, like I said, on Wednesday afternoon. Checked in, super easy, and the chalets, these new ones that we stayed in this year, they're just like copy and pasted throughout the resort. So there was probably 3 or 4 of them that were right in a little cul-de-sac where we were staying. We had Team Norway on one side of us. We had the Platinum Rig guys on the other side of us. So the Platinum Rig truck was parked outside of our
smack dab in the middle of the circle. It created its own little island.
Yeah. So it was, it was cool to get in and get settled into, obviously, your residence for the week. We had 21 of us staying at this chalet that we rented, and it's a perfect way to do it, obviously, because you got a big group of people. You've always got people around. You've got, folks that can either stay in to make dinner if you want to do it. You can all go out and get dinner together. There's plenty of food options everywhere within driving distance of the venue, and it's a kind of a perfect way to get settled in and get a little excited about what's coming up soon.
And I think everybody bought enough groceries to last about 4 weeks and left it all in the fridge for us to clean up on Monday morning as we were leaving. The amount of food that we had to throw out was criminal. Oh. Absolutely criminal.
That happened last year, too.
People were very
I learned
aggressive.
my lesson. Vince and I did not have any extra. Because I learned last year, if you buy too much, you're stuck with it. So, it was a really nice venue. It was nice having a hot tub there. I actually got into it once. And it was very communal, which was pretty cool. The beds were not the greatest in the world, but what rental chalet for 20 people is going to have great beds?
Yeah.
I actually enjoyed my bed, even though it was a tad short. I was hanging off it from the knees down, so I actually had to pull. In our bedroom, there were 2 beds, and there was a little coffee table. I had to pull the coffee table to the end of my bed, so my feet had something to rest on.
Oh my goodness!
Oh God!
Well, Vince and I won the competition got there first and claimed the king size room with the jacuzzi tub.
So let's name and shame who was the worst housemate.
There wasn't one.
We didn't have a bad housemate, which was really nice.
Can we make up a story and blame someone?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Not a single one of them wanted to step up and challenge myself or Vince in a game of ping pong. There was a ping pong table in our basement.
Weak.
You guys played it for half an hour the first day and then never touched it again.
So we walked in.
Their dominance was that complete.
It was like the first episode of The Real World where they all run in and start scrambling around the house looking at all the things. And before Vince and I even had the stuff out of the car unpacked, we started playing ping pong. And I'm like in a hoodie, I'm sweating. I'm like, man, I'm exhausted already.
Yeah, the 2 of them did all that while Sandy got everything situated.
Oops.
Yeah, oops.
So
double oops.
So Josh was the worst roommate. Got it. Noted.
No, Josh was gone for half the time.
Yeah, Josh wasn't even there half the time. That was the perfect roommate.
He was the perfect roommate.
I paid my rent and I disappeared. And then, so we get there Wednesday, we get settled in, and then Thursday rolls around for athlete check-in, and we decided, so athlete check-in started at 10 a.m., and Sandy, I think I asked you Wednesday night, I said, we're going to go, how do you feel about getting in line at 9:30? So we get there early. And I'm thinking we roll in, we'll be the first ones in. We got there at 9:30, and the room was already packed.
Oh, yeah.
I believe it.
Hundreds of people in line for packet pickup. And Sandy, whatever you do, stop it. So, packet pickup is packed, pardon the pun. And you've got, everybody getting their 3K, their 15K, their team packets, their Make-A-Wish packets. And they did it a little differently this year. So they had 3K and 15K pickup in one location. For the team, you had to have all 3 of your team members check in. And then once all 3 were checked in, they gave you a single packet, which had all 3 bibs, all 3 wristbands, and your timing chip. And then they had Make-A-Wish there. And they had the pixie herself, Rachel Ann, was just running around like a little ginger ninja, running all throughout the room, solving everybody's problems.
Causing their own problems, I'm sure.
Well, no, but I mean, they, and it's funny. You looked at, you pick up your bibs, you get your T-shirts, you go through all the usual race day type stuff early, and then it was like they took the gear shop, which they actually had outside last year, right? They had in a little like trailer that they put in the festival area.
Yeah.
So what they did this year is they put it in that back room where that athlete staging area was.
Okay.
They broke the athlete staging area into two separate rooms, one for merch and one for athletes. So we had half the space we did last year, which was fine, and then the other half was for merchandise.
Sandy, I think you have a piece of paper over the microphone on your laptop. No, or not. You sounded far away.
You did.
I don't know.
Okay. So yeah, they had the merchandise in the back room, on racks, and they had tables, and it was pretty well organized. I mean, they do a generally good job when it comes to merch. And what's funny is merch wasn't supposed to open until like noontime, but I got my packets. I checked in with everything, and I go over, and merch is already flooded, right? Because they did obviously a great job of teasing these jackets that they were selling, shirts they're selling, gear that's going to be there. Within about 15 minutes of getting to the merch shop, I was already $300 in the bag. So it was, but they have their merch this year was awesome. So I got one of the branded like heavy duty rain jackets with the year on the side. I got the same backpack that I bought in Texas at US Championships. They had a World Championships version, so I bought that. T-shirt, poster, obviously with all the names on it. The merch, as it always is top notch. Unfortunately, I don't think Adrian can ever predict it, but they never seem to have enough merch, and especially in certain sizes. So,
amen.
Yeah, merchandise wasn't supposed to open till noon, but people were there and started going through, and the poor people working it were just running their tails off because originally things were not priced correctly. So they were trying to figure that out, but they made it all work. I only bought a hoodie and a poster. And Vince got a hoodie, and that was it for us. We kept it pretty simple this year.
It's one of the few beefs I have with the previous years. They've never had enough stock, and never had enough stock in sizes that I can wear, bigger sizes. I've got very little OCR Worlds geared because of that. So thank you guys for bringing me back a hat, because it wasn't dated, so I can wear it, and it'll fit.
I have it.
Thank you.
I also had to buy a new buff because my buff went MIA like a month ago, and buffs are the most. I don't know. I can't not buy them. They're just always there, and they always look excellent. Although,
until you lose them.
True. In Texas, they gave us a buff for free. So, but who am I? So, I was like I said, I was already $300 into the day pretty darn quickly. So, yeah. I mean, check-in was smooth. The gear, I think the only hurdle obviously was just that they got flooded with a ton of people right away, and I think that's it's hard to manage that crowd of people that are there for that reason, and they want to get their gear, they want to gear up for the weekend and sport all their new stuff as they walk around the venue and whatnot. So
absolutely. So constructive criticism: make gear check open at the same time as packet pickup. That way your people who are working that aren't caught unawares 2 hours ahead of when they think they're opening.
Or lock the doors.
Or lock the doors,
yeah.
Yeah.
But the way they had it set up and the way it was a lead through where you go to Station 1, Station 2, Station 3, Station 4, and then you exited through merchandise. Just like at every amusement park, every museum, you exit through the gift shop.
Oh,
so that was brilliant on their part. And on top of in addition to selling the posters, you could buy a tube there if you forgot to bring one.
So
I thought that was smart.
So sold tubes for posters if you at a premium price, but hey, you're paying for convenience in that case. So I mean, I thought check-in was smooth, gear super smooth. Obviously, they didn't have any payment issues. It wasn't like. Again, I always joke with Adrian. I say, you have the knack for picking the most remote locations that never have access to the internet. When we were in Texas, they were actually handwriting down credit card numbers because they didn't have any service.
Oh, goodness.
So much easier, obviously, to just grab something off the rack, swipe and pay, and you're on your way. So
I have to say I was impressed, too, because last year we went early this year for the sole reason that last year, if you went a little bit later, the line was an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours long.
Mm-hmm.
So we went early. But what's interesting is that I expected the line to stay long the entire day. And so I recommended to other people go early. And it turns out that the line died down later in the day. So whatever it was that they did differently to make things go more smoothly, it definitely worked in their favor because they didn't end up with a line that was huge all day long.
Yeah, they definitely, the registration part, it seemed like everybody was super proactive about. There was lines in the morning, obviously, and it's like anywhere else. As soon as it's open, people want to get in and get it out of the way. And then by lunchtime, it was like, it was dead. And then they had a little bit of a rush later, Rachel Ann said, and that's obviously to be expected. But they handled it well. They had plenty of staff and volunteers on hand that were excellent. They had, I will also say, as much as they were sticklers about people showing up on Thursday to do packet pickup, there was a couple flights that ended up getting delayed and people delayed getting in, and they were super flexible about letting people get their packets at a time that was convenient for them. So they didn't have any issues with people getting shut out of a race or missing a race. So it was a big...
I think people were very confused about what that was all about. I mean, they have to have a deadline because they need the majority of people to pay attention and to get in and out quickly.
Absolutely.
And they're not dicks. They know that people get stuck on flights or can't get out of work. But if they publicly or loudly express flexibility, game over.
Right.
Because then people take advantage when they don't need it.
Yes, they do.
That flexibility should be reserved for those people who are on a flight that arrives an hour later than it was supposed to. There's nothing people can do to prevent that.
Yep. No, absolutely. So they do a good job. Good.
Yeah, I was impressed.
All right, so on to the races. So we'll talk, and you've probably heard us talk about the event before, but if you haven't, or this is your first time kind of seriously looking into the event, so the World Championship does ultimately 4 events, 3 of them being competitive. So on Friday, they do their short course, which is a 3K 20-plus obstacle event. So really quick, really fast. They let pretty much everybody run the event, and then they do the pros at the end of the day. So everybody kind of gets to huddle around and see the competitive men and competitive women finish. So that was Friday. And then Saturday they do the long course. So a 15K full course, 43 obstacles. Little different. And Saturday, obviously, it makes more sense to do the pros early. So they do the pro men and women up front, and then they do the age groups throughout the day there. And then on Sunday, which has turned into team relay day. So they do a team relay race. And as is tradition for the last 3 years, it also pours rain every Sunday. So we had, again, another just torrential downpour throughout the day. But so let's start with the 3K course. So I want to go through kind of the obstacles that were there, because I know we've had some people asking about them, but more than anything, just kind of the course itself and how it was set up. So I'll say this, compared to last year, much different layout of the course. The team, Adrian and team and Brent and all them, they definitely used the mountain this year a lot more than they used it last year. So we were going, up and down Blue Mountain several times, mostly on the long course, obviously, but even the short course. Yeah, not in the
3K. The 3K stayed at the bottom.
Yeah, we had just a short climb, and then, you went up to a couple basic obstacles like hurdles and an inverted wall, and then you come down to, there's no real way to describe the way they bunch these obstacles, but there was a group of obstacles at the end of the 3K course that was just relentless. So they had, just going off a couple of them, they had the Battle Frog rig. It's still an old Battle Frog rig, so I'm going to call it that. They had a Battle Frog rig that was one of the hardest rigs I've ever done there. I spent probably a good 25 minutes at it, failing it multiple times. Once you completed that, you went to a rec bag carry. And then, or I might be getting these kind of backwards, but
no, that's right.
Yeah, so you had a rec bag carry, and then you went back to another platinum rig. So it was rig, rec bag carry, rig, all in a span of, a quarter of a mile, maybe half of a mile, if that. And then once
and most of that was the rec bag carry.
Right. So then you complete the second rig, and you immediately take 10 steps, and you're at Skull Valley.
Yes.
So any remaining grip you had was obviously chewed up by Skull Valley. And then you finished with the Skyline, which is the metal zip line. And then the premier kind of finish line obstacle this year was Hubie Cushman's Indian Mud Run floating walls. So last year at the finish line, Paul, where you worked, it was Urban Sky. So this year, much like in Texas, there's this 2-level hanging wall that Mr. Cushman had. So it was 3 hanging walls that you traversed. You went over to a cargo net, you climbed up a story, and then you traversed 4 more hanging walls, climbed up and over a cargo net, down a rope, and you were met with the final wall that you had to get over, and kind of the same wall as last year with some ropes and knots in it. But that last quarter mile, half mile, was probably one of the hardest sections of course that I've done in any of these 4 years. And, factor in, you also had the Mud Hero race brought a 14-foot warped wall. So a seriously high wall that you had to get over. And that one was placed right where the Platinum rig was last year. So you had the warped wall, which led you into a sandbag carry, which then led you into a rope climb. So short course was punishing. And, there's a lot of, people talking about this controversy around Hunter McIntyre was running the short course and bailed out of it because he hit the Platinum rig, or the Battle Frog rig, rather, tried it 3 or 4 times, couldn't get through it, and probably decided, I'm going to save myself for the next 2 days of racing. So actually pulled his band off and checked out and walked off the course right there. So it was punishing. And I'll tell you, after failing that rig 3 and 4 times, my forearms were just absolutely fried. They were on fire.
Was it too punishing? That sounds like that wouldn't have been a lot of fun for a lot of people.
I think if you ask everybody, I think you're probably going to get different answers.
Yeah.
So let's just say they did tame that one down a tiny bit for the 15K. So it was definitely challenging. I don't know about too challenging.
Well, I know Adrian's always said that the goal here isn't to have the hardest race.
Mm-hmm.
But I heard a lot of people say that was the hardest race I've done this year, ever, depending on experience level.
And it was significantly harder than last year.
And the weather played in, I know. We'll talk about weather, I'm sure, but the weather played a big part of it. But rig after rig after rig on a short course doesn't sound like I would have had a good time for sure.
Yeah, and I think what the perception of it being the hardest course people have ever done, I think speaks specifically to the type of obstacles.
Yeah.
When you're doing a Spartan race, you're going to get monkey bars, you're going to get Olympus, you're going to get Twister. So you'll get a couple upper body obstacles, but nothing to the same extent of the rigs that Adrian and team put up there. So much more upper body heavy than a traditional obstacle course race, which is more about bottom heavy, endurance, carrying heavy things, etc.
Sure, more varied.
Exactly. So it's I think people's reaction based on the difficulty is exclusively around just a varying type of obstacle. And day before, Adrian told us that he was going to have that yoke carry, right? That big, heavy wooden log with the bags attached to it like we did in Texas. But one, it was going to be on a hill. So that presents its own struggle in and of itself. But because of the rain and because of the mud that was on this mountain, he changed it to just a farmer's carry. So just you're carrying 2 bags of sand essentially up the hill. So again, you think about, you've got farmer's carry with both hands. You've got a rec bag carry. You've got a 25-foot rope climb. You've got 2 rigs. You've got floating walls. You've got all this stuff that's very upper body and grip intensive that not a lot of people are used to. And I think that is really where people are starting to open their eyes and saying, oh my God, I've never done a course like this. And, and again, you go back to Bone Frog and Spartan and much more leg heavy than arm heavy. So, but I think it's good. I think it opens up people's eyes as to what else they need to work on as far as training and hopefully opens up some of the other company's eyes and say, hey, maybe we can focus on obstacles that are a little more technique based than here, carry a heavy rock up a mountain.
Now we
But
mentioned
at the same time, I hope that they don't all go to, let's just do more rigs.
Thank you, Sandy.
Because 3 rigs in a row, because basically Skull Valley is a rig.
Right, basically.
So
I
3
don't mind.
rigs, and there wasn't 50 feet between the 3 of them. I mean, you could toss a rock from one to the next in a row. And don't forget the Lagafta, I can't even pronounce it, Northman race added another obstacle in between the warped wall and the sand. After the sandbag carry, they had the Lagafta Dra or something like that. So,
nobody will ever pronounce it.
Those of you that speak French, please don't hate me for my lack of ability to pronounce it. All of those pretty much right in a row on a very short course was really tough. And the other thing that has been somewhat of a controversy in the discussion, and I want to bring it up now since we're talking about the rigs, is that on the short and long course, 2 of the 3 rigs at the end, I couldn't even get started on because I couldn't even get to them.
Yeah, that's a big
unless you
talking
had
point.
the ability to climb a strap or climb essentially a nunchuck to get up to the obstacle, you were dead in the water from the get-go. So those of us who climb ropes using our legs, I can't climb a strap using only my hands. And so therefore, I never even got to start 2 of the 3. And I wasn't the only one. There were quite a few people who were in that same...
You're far from the shortest person.
No, I'm 5'7".
Yeah.
Now, I will admit that this white girl don't jump. My vertical leap is non-existent, and I understand that that's part of my issue. But at the same time, when I'm 5'7" and I can't reach either of 2 of the obstacles to even get started, it's a little demeaning. I wish there had been a rope climb so that I could get up to them, because once I get going, the obstacle should be the obstacle, not getting onto the first element of the obstacle. And I also understand why they did it. They did it so that the tall people wouldn't have an advantage to be able to jump to the 3rd or 4th skull or, the 3rd or 4th monkey bar before they even start. So
it doesn't take a lot to have a step in one of the lanes.
Right. Especially a retry lane, I think would be the perfect spot for it.
Yeah.
And
because I would like to think that I could have done something on both of those. The day of the Make-A-Wish, Vince gave me a boost up to Skull Valley, and I made it through the first set with no problem. And then, of course, everything was wet, and I slipped off of the monkey bar. But, I could have done something.
Mm-hmm.
I'll admit, sitting at home, hearing about the heavy rigs, and the rig after rig after rig, and seeing the rain and the wet, while I was sad I wasn't there, I wasn't sad I wasn't on that course. Because that's everything I don't like in a course. Multiple rigs, miserable weather, yeah.
I'll tell you though, we lucked out Friday. We didn't have really a ton of rain on Friday. There might have been some late in the afternoon.
I got caught in the rain, and all of the last obstacles were all wet.
And then Saturday,
including all of the grip obstacles.
Right. And then Saturday, rain in the morning, clear during the day. Like I went out at 9:30 Saturday. I was done in 4 hours, so 1:30ish, and the rain was just starting at that point. And then Sandy, when your wave went out again, you guys I think were hit with a pretty hard rain for a little bit, and then it died. So I mean, we definitely had periods of rain throughout each of the days, really.
Yeah.
And then Sunday came to a head.
So if we, just to wrap up on the 3K, I liked the 3K a lot. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more variety rather than 3 rigs all in the short course. Maybe Skull Valley in one of the rigs and then some other alternative, because there wasn't a ton of variety. Well, that's not true, because they did have the monkey bars. They had the warped wall. They had 2 carries.
Yeah.
But
they had the Northman. The Northman obstacle this is the one that it's glorified, like it's like the little ticker or the metronome, right? It's just a vertical pole that you have to kind of force into a different direction and then transfer to another pole. And I'll tell you, the original video we saw, I think, had the entire attendee audience in a panic. A ton of people like, I can't climb up that thing. I can't make that transition because it's so far apart. Like me as a 6'4" person was worried about making that transition as well. And the Northman crew, they were building that obstacle from the morning we got there on Thursday all the way through the evening. And they built the obstacle. They took down a bunch of poles. They put wooden slats in its place. They had footholds on the wood by the end of the day. So it was a very rugged build. It was very, it was very Northman. It was very like Canadian. And they had, what I loved about it, and it kind of went, I don't think a lot of people noticed it. They put these little metal tin cans, little metal buckets right at the beginning of it. So if you lost your band, they just took it and dropped it in the bucket. And on the backside, they had an axe that was like they had the axe in a log, and they were putting the bands on the handle of the axe as people were handing them in. So it was a really cool obstacle, and I've heard a lot of good things obviously about their race as well. But it was nice to see that. It was a brand new obstacle that we hadn't seen before.
Yeah, it was very, very different and very cool. I enjoyed it. I got through on my second try. And
it was one of those obstacles where if you've never seen it before, you have no idea how to approach it. So you just you go at it, you fail, you figure out a way to do it, and you wouldn't think that you're on one side of a pole and all you have to do is shift your body around to the other side. You wouldn't think that's difficult, but when you're on the obstacle, you're like, why can't I just turn around? It doesn't make any sense. It was really challenging. It was deceptively hard, but it was a great obstacle. I think people loved it, and it was a perfect spot for the crowd to watch.
Yes.
And I think that Adrian loves to have that audience-friendly build, and I think that was kind of the reason for, Rig, Skull Valley. When you looked at, when you walked over there were people everywhere watching, that group of obstacles. So it was very spectator-friendly, but obviously not so racer-friendly, being very intense in a very short distance and short period of time. So, 3K course was definitely a challenging start to the weekend for sure.
Agreed. I thought it was significantly harder than last year's 3K.
Yeah, I completely agree.
To a person, everyone who I asked agreed with me.
Yep. I think I got just about the same response. And I think the 15K on Saturday, well, let me just throw a personal note in here. When you come to a race, please make sure you have your bib and your timing chip so you don't walk to the start line and then frantically grab Sandy and say, I need you to drive me back to the chalet because I forgot my envelope there. So another reason to also reside closer to your venue rather than further, because we had to run to the car, drive back to the chalet, get my starting chip, get my bib, and get back in line.
I had gotten one of the last parking spaces the first time I parked.
Yeah.
Oh dear, Josh.
Yeah, it was an eventful start, but I was nice and warmed up. But I'll tell you, the theme of the day on Saturday was mud. Well, clay, but mud, clay. There was
hills.
Yeah. We I brought up last year's map to compare it to this year's map, and we have, I think, 6 climbs up the mountain, and not by any means like death marches like you see at a Spartan race, but challenging climbs up this mountain for sure. So, the start of the race is uphill generally. So you come out, you go up a tiny hill, and you're climbing for a bit. But the problem was the rain we had the night before had made everything very slick. And by the time my wave got there, and I was the 4th wave to go out, so it was pro men, pro women, men aged 30 to 35, or 30 to 34, whatever, and then mine, which was 35 to 39, we got to a slope about a mile into the course that had turned into a complete mud slick, just no grass, just complete mud, top to bottom, to the point where our entire wave was just pushing each other up this hill. And it was, people are digging their hands in, they're sliding back into each other. And it was we hadn't even gotten to like a real obstacle yet. We had jumped over a few hurdles and gone through maybe an over-under wall or a barbed wire crawl. We were maybe a mile into this course, and an hour had passed, and we were just getting absolutely beat up by this mud climb. And we did it once, and then we went down the mountain, and we at the very bottom of the mountain they had a rope wall. Probably a 15-foot rope wall. Paul, you might remember it from Ohio a couple of years ago, where it was a rope wall that you climbed up over, and on the other side it was just the rope hanging down with the knots. So that was there at the bottom where everybody's covered head to toe in mud. So you can imagine trying to like scramble up this wall. You get a little bit of a backup. It's raining again. So again, we're an hour into our course, and we've gone maybe a mile at this point. So the first section of the course was definitely the terrain. So you're going up hills, you're going down hills, you're running sideways down trails. You had about 13 obstacles as I look at the map that were within the first 3 miles, but the majority of those obstacles were relatively basic.
Yes.
Walls, barbed wire crawls, hill climbs. There wasn't really a significant obstacle until you got to probably that 14-foot warped wall in the monkey bars. So I think that's really where it started back into kind of obstacle intense. And then you do a couple of the obstacles in the festival area. You do the Northman, Lagath, whatever it is. You do, Conquer the Gauntlet had Stairway to Heaven at the top of the hill. Urban Sky was at the top of the mountain this year. Mm-hmm. So you spent probably a mile climbing uphill, and you're met with Stairway to Heaven, which, if you're not familiar, this is the Devil's Ladder, or the Devil's Steps, as they also call it. You go up, you do Urban Sky. Dragon's Back was at the top of the mountain.
How did you do on Dragon's Back, Sandy?
By the time I got to Dragon's Back, it was pouring, and it wasn't worth it.
Fair enough.
I'm not going to jump for a bar that is slippery and take a chance on ending my season. And so I knew all along that they did have 4 of them this time. Instead of 2 jumps, it was 4.
Yeah.
And what Josh failed to mention was that on the hill going up between Stairway to Heaven or Devil Steps and Urban Sky was an uphill barbed wire crawl that was very similar to the first climb up, where it was nothing but a slick of mud, to the point where you couldn't climb up without grabbing a hold of the jacks or the posts that were holding the barbed wire. At least I couldn't by the time I got there. I went into it was in the 3rd or 4th to last heat. And the course degraded pretty significantly between Josh and ours. And I couldn't get up the barbed wire crawl without pulling myself up on the jack and then putting my foot on it and pushing myself up to the next one. Pull up, push up, because you could not get any purchase at all in the mud.
Ugh.
Yeah, it was, I'll tell you, if you don't work on your core, it's a good way to work on your abs, because it's like you have no steady place to step whatsoever. So you're constantly readjusting yourself, like trying to gain balance, and even like running downhill, your feet are just flying out in random directions. It was intense. And then, again, to get hit with Urban Sky after that, you've got Dragon's Back, which seemed to go on forever. Like Sandy was saying, there were 4 individual jumps on that one
this time.
They had a quarter pipe there. They had that big wall, Sandy. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Just big flat wall that it was like a 12-inch top, so you couldn't reach up and grab it. You had to just get up and like put your arms on top of it and pull yourself up again.
And not only was it 12 inches wide, it was polished wood.
Right. So it was like a greased up wall you were trying to get over, which was oddly difficult. And then they get to I'll skip ahead a little bit because there was a couple basic ones. Then they get to the low rig. And the low rig was not the traditional low rig like we saw last year. So last year, Platinum Rig actually designed a rig that was half the height. So instead of it being a traditional rig that has obstacles 8 feet off the ground. These were 3 feet off the ground. So this year, the thing looked like a caveman built it.
Yep.
So it was all like
all raw logs.
Yeah, it was all like rugged logs and trees
and hemp rope.
And all they had under it was rope. So you had a little rope loop that you could hang onto or put your foot or arm through. And then you had another one with a couple knots in it. So a bit of a longer one that you could, again, put a foot on and rest if you want. Super rugged obstacle. And this one probably had the biggest backup I saw, I think, on Saturday during the 15K. Because you've got people that, are hanging onto these ropes and they're unsure how to traverse. And then you've got people getting on behind them. So you've got multiple people in the lane at the same time. I ended up putting my foot through the hoop at one point, and I just wrapped my body around the rope. So I'm just sitting there almost in like a pistol kind of formation, if you know what a pistol is, where you go down on one leg. So I'm like that. I'm holding the rope. I'm hugging it just to like rest. And I had no idea how to continue on in this obstacle. So using my height to an advantage, all I did ultimately was just lean forward and Superman my ass across the rest of the obstacle and ring the bell. But even, the volunteer who was there even said Ryan Atkins had to do it 3 times because he was unsure how to get through it. John Albin had to wait and watch Ryan Atkins because he was unsure how to do it. But it was just a gritty, hard to navigate, super grip and core intensive obstacle, and super low to the ground. Right, so maybe 3 feet off the ground at most. I think
maybe, yeah.
So
3
that
feet
one
might be generous.
Yeah, that one was also a tough, a tough entry into what you were also about to do, which was again the wreck bag, Skull Valley, skyline, floating wall combination towards the end. So it was a good obstacle, definitely a challenge, and I'm sure probably was up there in terms of obstacles that claimed more bands than any others out there. So if you still had it by that point, that is, because there was a handful.
That was after the Devil Steps, which I'm sure got quite a few.
Oh yeah, yep, absolutely. So 15K, I love the way it finished. It was a nice run downhill, a very runnable section of the course. Again, at least for me, it was probably much different from Sandy.
I'll talk in a minute.
Yeah, but it kind of opened it up. So I'm sure like John Albin probably had a heyday in that. He was probably skirting down the hill like a butterfly in the wind at that point. So yeah, I really like the 15K course. Super, super challenging, very damaging. I've got some bruises all over me, and Sandy's got a handful of bruises, I know for sure. But it was a great course, and I think a lot of people really enjoyed it. But obviously with the balance of people understanding that it was a very challenging and at times very difficult course.
Yeah. So I went through the downhill, and it was through the woods. And by the time I got to it, it had already been raining for an hour, and there was no solid piece of ground from the top to the bottom. You had to be concerned about your feet flying out from underneath you at every given possibility, or every moment. And it was a lot of, okay, here comes a little downhill. There's a tree. I'm going to throw myself at the tree and hope it stops me.
Mm-hmm.
And then throw myself at the next tree and hope it stops me. And I got the worst bruise I probably have ever had in my life when I was standing there, and the next thing I know, I'm falling because my feet went out from underneath me. I wasn't even moving. And it was so slippery, and I landed on top of my headlamp.
Oh.
And then to add insult to injury, the headlamp got caught on something, and I continued to slide down the hill. And at the point at which the tension of the headband overcame whatever it was hooked on, the headlamp came flying at me and smacked me in the back. So
it sounds like a calamity all around.
Oh my gosh. Coming downhill was treacherous at best once the rain got going, and it was just slick as...
So I heard there was controversy about the finish for the later waves. There's obviously the 5-hour cutoff, but I heard there were people who ran the course but didn't were told not to do obstacles, other people who were literally bussed to the finish line or close to the finish line. So what was the story there?
They didn't have much choice.
Yeah.
The course became unsafe very, very quickly. So the cutoff time should have been 7:45 for the last journeyman. Journeyman went off at 2:45. 2:45 plus 5 is 7:45.
Yep.
They started pulling people from the top of the mountain at 7.
Okay.
Because there is absolutely no way that they could have made it down the mountain by 7:45. And if you think about it, that's the same thing that happened to us last time. The
Sure.
group that I ran with, we had a half a mile left. We had 6 minutes to get to the finish line. And they said, you are no longer allowed to do obstacles. You need to run.
Yep. Finish.
But at that point, we were all DQ'd anyway because none of us had our band, you know. So, yes, they did have that happen. No, I don't think they could have done it any other way. Once the rain started, it was so unsafe. It was not even funny. I had enough trouble doing it, and it was daylight.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I'm not a bad downhill person. I'm a lousy uphill person, but I'm not bad downhill, and it was scary.
Yeah, and the other thing there is, I don't know, you know, when you look at Spartan Race, and especially you take like a beast into consideration, right? They're very forward on communicating, have your headlamps, you know, have your lights if you're going to be prepared to run in the dark. I don't know how prepared or maybe not prepared, but I don't think this is a course that you run in the dark, right? It's obstacle centric, right? It's about rigs and these floating walls and things like that. And these are not necessarily obstacles that one are going to be lit up, right? The ones in the festival area will be lit up just by the light of the area itself. But like, take the Battle Frog rig, or actually take the rope climb, right? The rope climb was far back in the course. It was ultimately you just come out of the woods and run down a hill. If you're doing that in the dark, you know, that I think is a real problem. So, yeah, I mean, the course had definitely become precarious is the lightest way to put it, I think. So they started taking people from the top and bringing them right down to the bottom. And it, again, while disappointing if you're one of those folks, and we had a handful of them that were still out there that did get carted down to the bottom. You know, if you're one of those folks, obviously it's disappointing, but trust me, you would not want to have run down that last hill in the dark, in the mud, in the rain. It would have just been dangerous and would have resulted in far more problems than they created by pulling people off the course. So,
Yeah, like I said, I don't think they had a choice.
Yeah, I completely agree. So a couple things before we wrap up part 1 here, and the next episode we'll cover the team relay and the Make-A-Wish and final thoughts and things like that. So I'm just gathering up a couple questions from the audience that we've taken in here. So Sandy, what was your favorite obstacle of the weekend?
Let's see, favorite obstacle. From a purely selfish point of view, Skyline. Skyline was the zip line where you had two little, I don't know, 1.5 to 2-inch blocks that you had to jump over while you're hanging from the zip line. And that was simply because last year I couldn't get it no matter how hard I tried. This year I got it. So I was very happy about that. I did entertain the crowd, though, one time when I got to the block and slipped off and landed flat on my back and just went, whee! And everybody just thought that was hilarious because it was pouring rain. Everybody was miserable. So add a little levity. And then the Lagaf, that was just very creative and cool.
And we didn't mention it, but because of all the rain, the main aspect of that Northman race obstacle is metal poles that you're using to traverse the obstacle. So in between the 3K and the 15K, the guys from Northman did come in and put grip tape on the... No?
Between the 15K and the team. It was not there for the 15K.
Oh, okay. Well, they did put grip tape on the obstacle, and that way... Are you sure about that, Sandy?
I'm pretty sure.
Okay. But yeah, they came in and put grip tape because if you saw in the short course, Hunter was running, and again, the pros on the short course did it later in the day when it started raining. Hunter ran up to that thing at like 20 miles an hour, jumped onto it, and slipped right off. Goes back into the retry lane, jumps onto it, slips right off. I mean, this is a 200-pound guy. You get any grip on a metal pole when it's pouring rain. It just doesn't happen. So yeah, that was a nice change in the middle of it. Like we mentioned, they changed the yoke carry. They got rid of the actual wooden bar itself, which is again a super smart idea. Some other obstacle things, and somebody had mentioned this in one of the threads. Savage Race's Pipe Dreams was on the map, but was not fully built. They didn't finish it, and I guess Savage Race had an event this weekend or this past weekend, so I don't know if maybe they didn't have the staff to bring up and build it. But that never made it into the course itself. And a couple other things. Terrain Race had a wall that was supposed to be there. That didn't make it either. So a few last minute changes, obviously. And
and the Sandstorm monkey bars became just regular monkey bars.
Yes, which I think everybody's thankful for if you've ever seen the pictures of the Sandstorm monkey bars. So, I think overall, I'm as impressed as I am with the race and the experience every single year. I think this was definitely their most challenging course, absolutely, out of the 4 that they've had so far.
Oh, yeah.
And look forward to next year. But, we'll wrap it up with this and kind of quick final thoughts. But we got the team race to cover. We have the Make-A-Wish relay. We've got just the general experience of everything. I think we'll talk about in the next episode as well. And, we could fill up episode after episode, I think, after this event. And, there's other news going on in the industry as well. Spartan Race announced a global championship that they're rolling out for 2018. You've got Bone Frog, who just announced a second race in New England. Yay. So they're going to be coming to Barrie, Mass. So we've got a lot of news, and we'll have to do our best to get back on a regular schedule of recording podcasts.
Yes. I do want to, before we quit out, I do want to say that just as part of the wrap up, that it was, again, incredibly cool to see all the different countries, all the different languages, all the different cultures, everything that was there. 67 countries represented. Some countries had just a couple of people, some had tons. I'd like to say that the New England Spahtens brought probably a bigger team than most countries did. We sat around our house one of the last nights and just started making a list of everybody that we could think of that was there. And it's probably not an all-inclusive list, and we came up with 73 people.
That's insane.
So that was pretty cool to see all the Spahtens there as well. So I do want to give a shout out to our own group.
I think almost all of them showed up for spaghetti dinner on Friday night.
I think so. I think we had about 40 people for dinner on Friday night.
That's fantastic. I love it. I love seeing the drill shirts on the photos. And people don't appreciate, I think, how big an impact that has on you when you're a little community like us playing on the world stage like that. It's awesome.
And we'll talk about the other big team, MIT, when we talk about the Make-A-Wish, because some special kudos to them. So if you're on the Make-A-Wish, make sure you listen to part 2, or excuse me, if you're on the MIT team. Oh, and I do want to say thank you to those people who are listening, because I walked up to the starting line of the 3K and had 2 people turn around, and one of them said, "You were on Killington handing out candy and you gave me a hug." And the other girl goes, "You're from the podcast. I love you guys."
That's
so
fantastic.
A shout out to those people. It still never fails to just kind of set me aback a little bit when somebody goes, "I recognize you," and it just seems a little strange to me.
We should make some Any
thank
Spartan
you.
Show stickers to hand out to people.
So
Sandy's having a hard time dealing with her newfound fame, is what she's saying.
That was pretty cool.
Love it. All right, we will do this again very soon. And as always, thanks for listening, guys.
Thank you.
As always, guys, thanks so much for checking out the show. We'd love to hear what you think, so give us some feedback. Submit a question, share a story from one of your recent races or events. I think the show gets better and better with your participation, and it's not just Paul, Sandy, and myself talking. So to reach out, ask questions, suggest a topic, whatever it may be, follow along on Facebook. We've got a dedicated Any Spahtens Show page, or you can join the community at Any Spahtens on Facebook as well. Twitter's your thing. Shoot us a tweet at Any Spahtens. And if you want to find our full library of episodes, I'd recommend either iTunes or Stitcher. So again, for Paul, Sandy, myself, thanks so much for listening, and until next time.